You're listening to Accounted For, the Canadian podcast that explores the intangibles of every career. I'm your host, Daniel Lee. Hello. Welcome back to Accounted For. This is the podcast on a mission to expand your perspectives, have you question the status quo, and get you inspired to action for your own career. So happy Wednesday, everyone. I'm so happy that you're tuning in once again to the podcast. If you're new, welcome. This podcast is part of OMD Ventures. That is my platform focused on building systems to optimize human performance. And on top of the podcast, the platform has a weekly essay and newsletter. And that includes my daily learnings from the week. So subscribe to the newsletter at omdventures.com/stakeholders if you're interested. And if you'd like to support the podcast even more because you're a diehard fan, there is also a donation option where you can buy me various amounts of cups of coffee, and I'll use those funds to reinvest into the platform and cover existing costs and find ways to continuously expand the service lines. I've also opened up an individual coaching service to work with individuals to help them in their introspection and self-awareness journey. So if you are interested, then check it out on the site. And I think it's OMD Ventures/coaching. And that is my shameless plug for the day. Today's guest is Cyrus Moradian. He is the CEO and co-founder of Wize. Wize with a Z. Wize is an exam test prep platform based out of Vancouver that services universities throughout Canada and the US. He bootstrapped his first company, Beat Your Course, which is also the precursor company to Wize, to help university students based on his own experience as a first-year student who struggled in university despite having all-star grades in high school. To Cyrus, going to university was a contrarian move as he comes from a house of entrepreneurs, from his parents to his siblings, and he's the only member of his family who has pursued post-secondary education. Needless to say, unlike his fellow finance majors who went into fields like investment banking, Cyrus went straight into entrepreneurship out of university. In our chat, we look into when it is really the right time or the good time to go from a bootstrapped company to one that fundraises, what Cyrus believes is required to be an entrepreneur while he's gone through his own 7-year journey, and how Cyrus has thought about building a team where no one has left, and we cover much more topics. So I really hope my chat with Cyrus expands your perspective, has you question default, and really inspires you to action. Hey everyone, welcome back to Accounted For. Today on the podcast, we have Cyrus Moradian. Hey Cyrus, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks a lot for having me, Daniel. I appreciate it.
No problem. Cyrus here is the co-founder and CEO of Wize, a company based out in beautiful Vancouver. And as we are recording, Cyrus has been very kind to offer this beautiful boardroom to admire the beautiful downtown skyline. We've got the mountains, the oceans. So Cyrus, can you tell our audience a little more about the company Wize? What do you guys do?
Yeah, for sure. Wize is an EdTec platform that specifically tailor makes review sessions for university students across North America. So if you think of, for example, Khan Academy as an amazing EdTech platform, which it is, you'll go there or you'll go on YouTube and you'll find general help for, say, calculus if you're studying Math 100 at U of T. Whereas you could go on wisetome.com and you could look for Math 100 final exam prep and find an all-encompassing final exam prep session online customized for your specific university course, and that specific semester taught the exact same way as it was taught in class.
Gotcha. And for the audience, it's Wize with a Z.
That's right,
yes. Yeah. And Wize, I'm guessing that's the combination of the word Wize and academy?
Exactly.
Nice. All right.
If anyone has ever tried to get URL domains out there, they'll know the struggle.
I gotta ask, what attempt was this at the URL domain? How many have you counted into?
Oh, we definitely had well over 200 different names that we were experimenting with when Wize to Me we found out was available.
Wow. And do you go through a lot of like user testing, like to see will it come up easily on Google searches? Is there a process for that?
Once we hit Wize, we were pretty excited about it. So it kind of just hit all the checks for us.
Gotcha.
Hit the ground running with it.
Yeah. And so right now, we're based up in Vancouver at the moment, but did you grow up in Vancouver? Whereabouts did you grow up from?
Yeah, I grew up in Vancouver on the North Shore, graduated from high school, Sentinel Secondary, went over to McGill University where I studied finance, and then moved back to Vancouver where I started my first education company, Beat Your Course, back in 2012. And then, since then I've lived in Toronto for a couple of years.
Right, gotcha. But I guess Vancouver is home for you, eh?
Yeah, that's where I've been born and raised, and where I hope to spend many, many more years.
But in our previous meeting, you talked about how when you graduated high school, you graduated top of your class, and so it makes me wonder, growing up, was like education, doing well in academics, like was that a big push when you were growing up? Like, what was it like?
I didn't start taking school all that seriously until grade 12, and I realized you needed a certain, grade point average to apply to different universities, and that's when I'd say I started taking it more and more serious. But it was always a personal desire to do the best I could in school and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. And so, growing up, did you have any kind of childhood dream careers that you wanted to do? Like,
I always wanted to start a business and be an entrepreneur.
Really?
So yeah, that was always my dream.
Where did that come from?
My whole family's very entrepreneurial. My dad is an entrepreneur. My mom's an entrepreneur. My older brother is an entrepreneur. So most of our family dinners were talking about business or entrepreneurship or something of the sort.
Oh, wow. So do you mind sharing what kind of business each of your parents as well as your brother does?
Yeah, my dad brought over Quiznos into Canada back in 1996 and grew it, I think, over 600 franchises sold by 2003. And then now he does real estate and some other franchise stuff. My mom started a company called Kathy's Small Garden Company. And she's also a social worker, and she's had many, many different types of side businesses over the years. And my older brother has a real estate development company.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So I can only imagine that probably was the norm in your household, where it's like, oh yeah, Cyrus will probably be an entrepreneur, and you're probably thinking, yeah, I'm probably going to do this too.
Yeah, I was lucky. My parents never really pushed anything on me. They didn't even push good grades on me. So everything was about us discovering, for ourselves what we thought was going to make us happy to live a good life.
Yeah, and you mentioned how, so after school, you went to McGill to study finance, and you had that big wake-up call where, you in high school, you busted your ass in grade 12, got a really great, GPA, got into a great school, and then university kicked in, where I think you said how your first calculus exam, you got like a 51% or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So, I applied to McGill and got in with a 94% average, and then showed up for my first calculus exam and just passed by 1%. So, I think no different than most people, the transition from high school into university was going into a completely different jungle, and definitely took a bad mark and some bad grades first semester for me to kind of kick into gear about the new place I was in and how to best be successful there.
Mm-hmm. And it seems though that it was a very memorable experience for you, the fact that you remember exactly what percentage it was. Can you take me through what kind of emotions you might have been going through at that particular point, if you remember it?
Yeah, so actually in university, I went to McGill with my best friend, and we shared an apartment together first year in residence. And I remember we walked to the exam, and we both knew we didn't do well, but we were very hopeful that we would at least just pass. And we actually both got our marks back that we failed. And it was a bad exam to fail because we couldn't move on to the subsequent part of our program. My friend, unfortunately, didn't do so well, so there was kind of no hope for him. But I saw my grade as, literally it was, 54%, and I needed 55% to pass. So when I went back to school second semester, I arranged a meeting with my professor, and I said, hey, I'd like to just review the exam to make sure that, there wasn't any missing marks or something like that. And he reluctantly agrees to meet as, was part of the rules. I'm allowed to review my exam. And I start counting all the marks on it, and I got 55 on it, or whatever it was. It might have been 59 to 60, but I was missing 1%, and I counted it up like 6 times in his presence. And then I passed the exam back to him. I said, no, I passed this exam, like count it up, like really. And he counts it up and he goes, oh, we're very sorry for this mistake. And I ended up just passing so I could enter the subsequent course the next semester. And that's kind of where me and my best friend kind of departed ways in our program.
So soon. And it's so funny that how, you kind of went into an exam hoping to pass, and then you get this result, and this very meticulous nature comes in where you're like, oh, well, I looked at the rules and it seems I can go back and double check it.
Yeah, well, I was always told by older students to review your exams, and if you take that extra attention or care, you can get some extra percentage points. The TAs are maybe going to mess up, and at least you can learn from the mistakes you made on your class to understand how to better do it. So yeah, I think I got I guess I got unlucky that they didn't just count it right the first time and actually pass me, because my Christmas whole break was up in the air, but I'm happy how it all played out.
Yeah, and after that, I think the big inflection point you told me about last time was the moment when a PhD student like a TA brought 20 of you guys and really kind of grilled in this new method of learning calculus, and after that, I think you hit something 90% on your next exam, and from then on, you're like, oh yeah, now I know how to take these exams.
Yeah, so the next semester, I signed up for a crash course with a PhD who walks to me in 12 hours, 6 hours on a Saturday, 6 hours on a Sunday, a week before my respective exam. And, that first calculus exam that I showed up to was worth 90% of my grade the first semester. And the second semester was worth 90% again, just one final exam at the end. So about a week before, unfortunately, I was still in first year and I still didn't have the best study habits or have it figured out. But I was smart enough to, start looking for help a little bit before my exam, and I could sign up for something called a crash course with this expert instructor who would walk me through everything I needed to know to get an A+ on the exam. And it sounded too good to be true, but I heard from a bunch of upper year students and some fellow classmates who did the exercise the first semester that it was definitely worth going to. So I showed up, and in 12 hours, this gentleman indeed taught me everything I needed to know. I walked into my exam in the subsequent math course at McGill, and I scored 96% in the course overall. So it definitely had a huge impact.
And do you remember was there some kind of mental model or some framework that the instructor implemented that you just used to carry over to other study habits?
Yeah, the fundamental thesis was just that for STEM courses that are systematic and methodical in the way you go about solving practice problems, that if you do enough exam-like practice problems prior to the exam day, then, the question that you see on the exam could only be so different. So if you did enough practice and, you did enough variability in the practice problems that you did go about trying, that, hopefully you would learn the methodical processes behind how to solve any type of exam-like practice problem that was similar.
Mm-hmm. So there's also a lesson in actually taking exams, right? Because I think it's a completely different realm. People don't realize that there's one realm where you actually learn something, but exam taking is actually a different technique on its own.
Yeah, exam taking and, the fundamental problem was being a first year. And, you're in this different world relative to high school where, they told you exactly what to study and, you maybe had your parents driving you to school in the morning to make sure you went to every single class. And I think it was more about having that kind of older brother, let's call it, in university to guide you into making sure you knew what was most important to actually study to prepare for the respective exam than anything. If you even spent 100 hours studying for the course, but, not a single question pertaining to that 100 hours you studied was on the exam, no matter what, you wouldn't do so hot. So I think the notion of having this older, person while you're at this transformative time in your kind of life, transitioning from a very different place into a new setting, to have someone kind of guide you and help you is very important to you getting that confidence and you being able to be as successful as you can.
Mm-hmm. And it seems like this moment, though, made a very big impact on you, because afterwards it seems that you worked 3 years in McGill as a private tutor, and right after graduating you started your own company, Beat Your Course, which is the precursor to Wize. It was an exam prep company. You ran that for 5 years, but you still continue to run it, and 2 years ago you started Wize. So you continued down this pathway of helping other university students take exams and actually ace their exams. And so I'm wondering, what was it that got you just very excited, or really even like just interested in this way of just tutoring kids and helping them with their exams?
Yeah, I think that, it was a month before graduating McGill. I'd majored in business, majored in finance, was looking at careers to go down in finance, was talking to, same, students who were 1 or 2 years ahead of me, and they had started their career in investment banking, and they were explaining to me, their 80 to 100 hour work weeks that they're having regularly, working on spreadsheets or things that they weren't necessarily all that passionate about. So I think that in that discovery of what do I want to do next with my life, which I'm really happy that, I took the time to understand what were the best next steps for me. I was able to discover my passions and what I wanted to do next. And I think, that month really of just extra work in determining what I wanted to do made the biggest impact more than anything.
Can you kind of walk me through maybe examples or kind of what kind of steps you might have taken to understand this path?
Step number one was, what sector do you want to, dedicate the next 10 years of your life to? Pick a sector that's big enough that, if you want to start a company in it, that, the thing you could start could get really big. Through that, I came across education, which was something I was already very passionate about my entire life to some degree. My father was an immigrant who never ended up graduating high school, and then he dropped out, and then he became a successful entrepreneur. My older brother, he didn't go to university. He dropped out of high school as well, and he became an entrepreneur. And I was the first one in the family that graduated high school and went to university. But even my younger brother, he dropped out of high school as well. So the notion of the education sector definitely not being set up and right for everybody had a kind of deep impact in me already, just observing it with my family members around me. And then, education, you look it up, it's like a $10 trillion industry. It checks off the box of being a big enough industry. And it was something I was genuinely passionate about. And one of the things that I could see myself dedicating the rest of my life to.
Mm-hmm. And during that time, what was it like kind of feeling out the potential like peer pressure of, you have your friends or in finance majors that are going to go to investment banking. They might be even thinking or telling you, hey, Cyrus, what are you doing? Aren't you going to go get an internship? Aren't you going to go join a bank or get this, consulting job or something like that? How did you process that? Did you even feel the pressure at all, like coming from such an entrepreneurial household, knowing, even like telling yourself that I'll probably be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think, most of my friends around me, it seemed like the pressure was more so coming from their parents than anyone. There were definitely people who, were trying or who did experience social pressure, but, my parents were very easy on me in that respect, letting me find out what it was that I wanted to pursue. And then with respect to social pressure, no, I never really felt any.
And well, I guess I'm wondering, why did you even go to university? Your father didn't go, your older brother didn't go. it seemed like there were no pressures to go to university. The examples that were set in your life, it was kind of like, well, yeah, drop out from high school, you're an entrepreneur, you kind of start a business immediately. Why go the extra step?
Yeah, it was a personal decision for sure, but I just I can't really say anything except for I just thought that was the next best step for me.
And so then after you graduate, you came back to Vancouver, you started Beat Your Course. And how did that begin, where you thought, okay, well, I'm going to start this company that helps with exam prep? And so for the audience who may not be familiar with that company itself, can you kind of walk us through what the current day business model is?
Yeah, so Beat Your Course, about the month before graduating university, I made the firm commitment to start the education company that was really, it drawed off my own experience going from high school into university, that same experience I had where, I almost failed that exam and my roommate and best friend did fail the exam. I said, we can definitely make a bigger impact in these first years' lives and, offer the same exam prep session that I experienced the second semester, but, do it even better. And when we started out, our whole ambition was to make a tech-enabled exam prep service where students could download an app in our classes and communicate with the prof at the beginning and the end, which was our stab at personalizing the learning experience more so than was currently the norm in these exam prep sessions that other companies were doing, and that's kind of where we got started. But Beat Your Course essentially would summarize the entire semester's worth of course material in 12 hours, and we'd put on a final exam prep session at the end of the semester, about a week before the students' respective exams. The students would show up, a PhD or master level instructor would walk them through everything they needed to know to get an A+, and then we would leave them with a pretty hefty ultimate study guide, which would contain, an extra 100 practice problems for them to try on their own.
Wow. And so when you first started, did you just go about, like, how did that begin? Were you the one designing courses in the beginning, like going off of your own experience? Were you knocking on doors at like UBC or something, asking, hey, can I sit on a class and take all the notes for this class as well? Like, how did it begin?
Yeah. The longer story is as it began, I called one of my best friends, and he was pretty similar to me in a lot of ways. And I said, I have this idea for this education company. Just come join. And, being the best friend that he was, he says, great idea. Let's do this. And then about a month later of us wanting to do all of the same things, since we were so like-minded and we were both business guys, we decided to go our separate ways amicably. And then I was back at square one already. And then I said, okay, let me try this again. Instead of calling my best friend, who's so easy to convince, maybe I can just call very different people who I really respect, who I think are really smart, and who I think could add a lot of value in a different way. And so the two smartest people I knew, one of them was named Kashif, and I called him, and he was taking a gap year from med school. And I had studied business. He had studied sciences. So I said, I need to get a science guy. So I called him and took him out for a keg steak dinner, which I'm sure he'll still remember today. And he was not hard to convince, but he had a lot of great teaching experience and a very different background than me. So I brought him on board, and he had experience teaching for Kaplan, which was a big bonus. And then I brought another, then I said, okay, what about a computer guy? And, the joke I've said 100 times over probably now is I wouldn't even start a sandwich shop without, a computer guy. So I knew a gentleman named Michael Maloon, who studied software engineering at McGill and was famous within my friends at the very least for being the guy to go to if you had a startup idea in tech. And I called him, and I sold him on the dream of doing something big in education, and he came on board. And then that's kind of where it all started to go in the right direction, when we had some core founding members who complemented each other and who were all very different and wanted to work on very different things.
Gotcha. And what was the first kind of early stage business model? Was it Is it the same as what it is right now, or is it completely different?
Beat Your Course is relatively the same as back in the day. Significantly, obviously higher quality and much better in many different ways. But, generally speaking, it's pretty similar to the vision we had for when we started. The really cool part of the business is when we incepted the idea for Wize. And Wize was essentially, we had worked on Beat Your Course for 5 years. I had interviewed over 1,000 PhD and master students. I had personally interviewed, trained, hired, managed, onboarded 115 PhD and master instructors. And we had probably, we had created tens of thousands of hours worth of proprietary course material that these instructors worked on over the years. And we were going to scale Beat Your Course to Eastern Canada, to all the universities on the East Coast. And I, said, wow, what if we were to take a tech-first approach to this, and we were to use the last 5 years of hard work, all of the material that we collected, all of the experiences that we had, and take this business model to every major university and college across North America, let alone the world. And that's when things started to get a little bit more fun and a little bit interesting. And Wize really is a manifestation of Beat Your Course, taking a tech-first approach to it.
And did this evolution come to mind while you were in Toronto at that time with this kind of Eastern-focused expansion?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what happened. I'm thinking back in my head, and when I first wanted to start an exam prep business, I actually had the original idea to start an essentially Wize-like service. But, starting Wize back in 2012 was, zero experience in the exam prep industry or education in itself. And, I imagine, all of the trying to do everything that we did with Beat Your Course plus everything that we're currently doing with Wize. It took 5 years to do what we did with Beat Your Course. So you can imagine how it would have been tough for me to start Wize from the get-go. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was Paul Graham who talked about how you have to do the unscalable first before you can scale, and it seems like you had to have that 5 years of interviewing all these PhDs, collecting all these hours of material until you could maybe get into the point of feeling ready to now scale it to what Wize is now, where it's this completely distributed learning system.
Yeah, definitely. When Wize was incepted, we had already had 50,000 students go through our in-person exam prep sessions, and we had held over 1,000 in-person exam prep sessions. So you can imagine how much we learned doing that over 5 years to allow for us to create Wize and avoid all of the many mistakes, we would have made had we not had that first experience. And, speaking of Paul Graham, I basically, 2 years ago when I was starting Wize, I read every single one of Paul Graham's essays. And, that's the advice I would have for anyone who's interested in entrepreneurship is step one, just read everything that he's wrote and put it out there.
Yeah, for listeners who are not familiar with Paul Graham, he's the founder of the famed startup incubator Y Combinator, and he's got a wealth of knowledge in his essay archive. So I second that recommendation. It's definitely a gem to read through. And so far you've been a full-time entrepreneur for about 7 years. And when we met, you told me how you've never applied for a job before, and this has been your full-time gig. But when you first started Wize, you graduated. We don't have a lot of money when we graduate, and I think you told me how in your first year you had educated about 100 students through Beat Your Course. Were you cash flow positive within the first year, or like how long did it take until you kind of got to that point where you felt comfortable maybe even paying yourself like a salary or something?
Yeah, it wasn't until in the third year of operations, going into it, we knew that if we wanted to make the aggressive jump in sales, I was going to have to go full time at it. So it was going into our third year that we decided to make me full time, and then I took a pretty nominal salary to make sure I could keep the lights on. Right.
Yeah, I think when you first started, you were like you got a real estate license, and then you also worked at Muya's burger burgers, shakes, and fries?
Yeah,
in
so
franchise sales to like keep the lights on for your life for the first 2 years?
yeah, so I graduated from McGill and I went hard at work on Beat Your Course, and after 4 months of it, it really dawned on me that I probably wasn't going to make any real money for a while with this thing. So I got my real estate license, which was the best thing for me to imagine, pursuing the entrepreneurial lifestyle while still finding a way outside of that to make an earning. So I got my real estate license and then started selling real estate, and then I got an opportunity through that to be the director of franchise sales at a burgers, fries, and shakes franchise called Muya. And again, it was a position that was very flexible, so I was able to pursue Beat Your Course and get everything done that I needed to while still taking on that additional responsibility. It was essentially 2 full-time jobs for the first couple of years.
Yeah, and the real estate is real estate like a secondary interest, like passion area for you, or was it like some family influences that made you think like, oh, maybe this is something I'll try out? Like, what was the emphasis behind that?
Yeah, it was the next easiest thing for me to jump into. My dad had been in real estate. My older brother had been in real estate. So, it was the path of least resistance to keep the lights on.
And I guess I think the big thing is actually the flexibility of time, right? To actually be able to have the time to work on Beat Your Course at the time where like some full-time jobs, whether like if you went into banking as your moneymaker to fund Beat Your Course, you may not have had enough time to even work on your entrepreneurial journey, something that people don't really think about, the amount of time you actually control in your day.
Yeah, setting your own schedule was very big for me.
Mm-hmm. And so you operated Beat Your Course for 5 years until you moved over to Wize, but over those 5 years you were bootstrapped, I believe, for the company. What was the thought process behind staying bootstrapping as well as staying bootstrapped and not trying to go out and fundraise to grow it faster?
Yeah, I think that Beat Your Course was, as much as we didn't want it to be just a lifestyle business, it was very much so a beautiful lifestyle business. And, I think the notion of raising money is best served for when you have an idea how to put, gas on the fire, as they always say, not to try to make something into something that it's not. And even though, me and my co-founders were very excited to try to find a way to pursue something outside the scope of a lifestyle business, the reality is we hadn't figured out what that was going to be yet. And we only did our first round of funding after we incepted Wize, and felt like we had something that could make a global impact.
And you talked about the lifestyle business part. So for the audience who may not be familiar, what was your definition of what a lifestyle business would be?
Yeah, maybe not worthy or not. It's not necessary to have venture capital to continue to grow it, and that's kind of maybe the definition I'll leave you with, because everybody's definition of a lifestyle business is very different.
Mm-hmm. And so then, if you didn't start Wize, would you have been able to live comfortably with just having Beat Your Course in operation?
Most certainly, very comfortably by North American standards.
But then you decided to then say, all right, I've done this, now I'm going to move on to something even greater. Was it like, I'm just thinking, a part of me thinks it would have been there's got to be a voice in you that might have said, oh, Cyrus, this is great. Let's just, let's keep it at this. Why push on further?
Why push on further? For me, it wasn't a hard decision to make. It was why it would be harder for me to answer why not push on further, than especially being in education. I want to make the biggest impact I possibly can. And at the end of 5 years with Beat Your Course, I felt like I had accumulated a different skill set than when I had first started Beat Your Course. I had accumulated a skill set that I thought could be used towards making the global education sector better. Then it's like, if you genuinely felt like you had the skill set to make, education better on a global level, why wouldn't you, pursue it to try to see if you could?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in terms of the business model, so as it grows, I've had another entrepreneur who was in the EdTech space who had a B2B approach. The individual, I think it was like episode 7, his name was Vikram, and he made software for, I think it was K-12, and his main clients were like the school boards in Canada. And he talked about the big challenges there. But right now, for you, like your course is a B2C business. Wize is a B2C business. Is that something? How did you figure out like the B2C way would work for you and not like the B2B? Because I find that a lot of entrepreneurs, you read certain kind of blogs, like they'll say, "Oh, like you want to focus on B2B because B2C is so hard."
Yeah, I think the reality is both are hard, right? I would pick the better one for your business. If your business is better suited for B2C and you try to take a B2B approach to it, then you're probably going to be in trouble. And if B2B is the approach you're taking for a B2C company, you're probably again at an uphill battle. So B2C was just the approach that worked best for the business model of Wize.
And was there, do you remember a particular point where you felt this kind of validation where, okay, this is going to work? Or was it a series of different events that gave you this kind of conviction that this is going to work?
The B2C approach, or?
Yeah, like the B2C, or kind of more this approach for Wize itself.
Yeah, I think I just believe so strongly that we're not currently using readily available technology to improve the learning experience of students all around the world. That, I just know for certain that the future of learning is going to be so much more fascinating and exciting than the current one that we live in, that there's a very low probability of me not buying into a better future of learning. So as a result of that strong conviction for the future I see, I just, couldn't see Wize not working, being as progressive as it is.
Mm-hmm. And I think on the entrepreneurial journey, though, there's discussion about entrepreneurs needing to know when to quit something and stop being stubborn and learn to pivot into something different. How do you think about that? Like, how do you kind of assess whether something's working or not? Like, what point is there? And when do you also know that, no, we're going to get there. Like, we just have to push on a little further. How do you think about that?
I think there's a big difference between a big pivot and iterating and improving and adjusting your business model each day. And we're religious in iterating and improving Wize every single day. Even myself as the CEO, I want to, level up myself and continue to iterate and improve as fast as I can as a member of this company. So, I would say there's a big difference between the pivoting and the iterating and improving for me. And thus far, for the most part, there's just been minor to major iterations and improvements that we've made, and we haven't had to do a massive pivot. Although, if we do, we're ready for it.
And these kind of iterations, these kind of small obstacles, I think, depending on how some people might look at it, you can say that every day there's a small obstacle to overcome. But when I ask you about an obstacle, what's the kind of first big event that comes to your mind?
Well, you're asking me a week where, I'm doing 50 final interviews with 50 different PhD and master students from across North America. So the biggest obstacle is making sure that I show them a great experience and, I pick the right ones to onboard and bring them into the Wize mission. So that's my kind of current obstacle. But there's a new obstacle each week. And even back to your previous point on, pivoting. Maybe someone else would have classified that we've pivoted 100 times. It's just, for me, I would have called the things we've done so far to date as really iterations and improvements based off of what the customers were telling us that we could do to make their experience more optimal.
Mm-hmm. And in my own journey of I think it's just been past a year, so I'm a baby compared to the amount of years that you've had. But even then, like in the first year, I've had so many learnings from a lot of mistakes, and I can only imagine how many more mistakes I'll make as I learn. For you, over the last 7 years, what kind of key learnings have constantly stuck with you as you constantly find yourself remembering that mistake and go, oh yeah, I remember that time, I can't make that mistake again. I can't make that mistake again. Are there some that come to mind as these very material ones that continue to pay dividends?
You know, I might have to come back to that. I can't think of any particular mistakes that come to mind. Yeah, just the notion of always improving every single day. You know, as the CEO of the company, you know, the company is only going to get as good as I can, is only going to improve as much as I can continue to improve as well. And that's something that I feel strongly about. Everyone at our organization, you know, all of us need to continue to improve in order for the company we're building to actually end up improving as well.
And in terms of that, as the CEO, as a leader of the company, you mentioned briefly your friend Michael Maloon, who was the computer science tech guy that you brought on. He's been with you for 7 years.
Yeah, 6 years.
6 years.
Yeah.
6 years. And I think right now you said you have 14 full-time employees and none of them have quit on you. And so it makes me wonder, what do you think is a big factor of them staying on with you and continuing to push on this mission with you?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is leading by example. And yeah, I think most of them will, or all of them will tell you that I lead by example. And, you know, I'm usually, call it as an expression, the first one in the office and the last one to leave. And I think when you're building something great and you're trying to attract great people, the notion of making sure that you lead by example might be one of the most important things that I would say.
Is there a particular feedback that you remember fondly on that validated that, oh, yeah, I am doing the right thing by leading by example, like something that one of your employees might have said to you in passing, or maybe even like a formal feedback?
You know, the reason I stuck on that one is I got a really nice birthday message from, it was my birthday yesterday, and really? Shout out to Peter. He gave me a really nice birthday message that, you know, was him emphasizing that it makes it so much easier to do what he does in his role as a result of seeing me lead by example. So that's kind of just the first one that came to mind.
Yeah, well, and happy belated birthday.
Thank you.
Wow. And in terms of leading by example, and I can imagine there's other facets kind of surrounding that as well in terms of how you think about designing the organization. What kind of approach do you have about that? Like, do you have this kind of model of this dream organization you want to build, and do you just overlay processes on top of that? How do you think about it?
Yeah, big one for me, as it is with a lot of people out there, is the people that you choose to bring on in that organization and how important it is and how important their role is in the company. So, you know, making sure you find the right people and you take that extra time to get to know them before, you know, you bring them on board. And, you know, at Wize, it's very common that we'll do a 3-month internship for any full-time hire. And we make it just as much about us letting them find out about everyone on our team and how we do things, and as much as it is about us finding out if they're the right fit for us. And yeah, that's definitely something that yeah, we probably just started with because there was yeah, I don't know how that came to fruition, but now that's pretty common practice for us. I don't think we've actually ever made a full-time hire without them committing about 3 months of either as an independent contractor first, or starting out a little bit low-key and then coming on the team full-time thereafter.
Wow. And I'm guessing then it's a natural selection pattern if people during their process go, oh, what? No, I'm not going to do that. And they just opt out. I guess it kind of predetermines the kind of people that you want to have in your team.
Yeah, definitely. Fortunately, most of the people we've done the 3-month internship, it's ended up working out. I actually can't think of any example where it didn't, but yeah.
Wow. And you also mentioned how, you know, as a CEO that you have to hire the right people. And in our first meeting, you told me that you are a master delegator. And when I was telling you that I might need to hire an assistant for myself. But how did you get accustomed to that? Like getting used to offloading responsibilities and even knowing when to hire someone to take on this new kind of responsibility?
Yeah, if you think of delegating, it really comes down to trust, right? If you're looking at someone and you trust them 100% with the 20 tasks that are on your list and you think that they can do it just as good, if not better than you, then really nothing would hold you back from delegating it to that person, right? So if you bring on the right people and you build up the right trust with them, then I think it becomes much easier to call it a master delegator. But I'm only a master delegator if I have the right people around me to be able to delegate those things to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a thing that I'm trying to get comfortable around. I think empirically or like hypothetically, it makes me think, oh yeah, like I've been hired before. I can't believe they wouldn't trust me. And now as I'm in the shoes of trying to think about hiring someone, there is that kind of, like, I have to give up control and this kind of I don't know, this thought of like letting go of something and trusting someone else. It's not as easy as I thought it would be.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy by any means, but I think it's something that becomes inevitable if you only have the capacity to do 10 things and you have 100 things on your list and all 100 things need to get done by Friday and it's Monday. Then maybe you have to delegate, and then you just get better and better at delegating as time goes on. But, whenever I hire, you asked me about when do I know it's right to hire and bring someone on board. Whenever I hire someone, I make it an active practice. If, for example, let's simplified example, I'm hiring a marketing guy to take care of all marketing. My first step is to train that guy on marketing everything I know about marketing at the organization, such that he should be, just through my training, as good as I was at marketing. And then, when I start delegating him stuff with marketing, he's able to utilize everything that I taught him coupled with whatever he was bringing to the table. So, I commonly say, if I bring you on board and I hire you for something, I'll very quickly make you just as good, if not better than me at it. And then I'll expect you to be better at it moving forward, because you should have my skill set plus your own and whatever expertise you bring to the table.
Yeah, I guess they get a 12-hour crash course on everything right?
Exactly. Yeah. 12 hours or 2 hours or 100 hours or whatever it takes. But that's kind of how I try to train and then delegate.
Mm-hmm. And on this entrepreneurial journey, you've had influences from your parents, your siblings, but I'd also like to know then, a common question I like to ask other entrepreneurs is, who's the third most influential person you have as like a role model or just in life in general? And I ask third because usually a lot of people say the parents as their first two. So I'm wondering for you, who kind of comes to mind?
I tried to pick a new role model almost every month. So it's what do I need to get through that month or that half year or that year? And, as an entrepreneur, it's not like I know everything, but anything I don't know, I'm interested to go and learn about. So if, I'm at 3 employees and I'm going to hire 10 and I'm going to go from 3 to 10 and I know the culture is going to completely change, I'm not going to all of a sudden just naturally be the best person at making sure that the culture changes accordingly perfectly. But I'm going to go pick up a book and I'm going to read about how to make sure the culture changes properly. So, I don't know if I necessarily have a third person, but anytime I don't know anything, I'm I'm a very active learner. I'll actively seek out what it is the gaps in my knowledge to end up with still an optimal result. And I think that, maybe it just changes depending on what I need to go through.
Do you mind sharing then the role model for this month or this current problem that you or hoping to address?
Yeah, I recently read the book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. Have you read that?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
So, we're going through fundraising, and, I don't know all that much about fundraising. So, I went to look for a book for which I could learn from a more experienced entrepreneur who, has already gone through 1,000 times over whatever I'm going through. And, highly recommend that book to anyone who hasn't read it. And, it's been, call it instrumental to some degree in my life, being able to have that resource, catalog that information, pick up that knowledge, and be able to, go back to work with a different frame of mind.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned about how when you decide to fundraise, it's because you now have an idea. You should have an idea of like how you're going to spend that money, how to add, oil to the fire, so to speak. How did that, like, what was your kind of realization? Like, what kind of strategy that came up to you that said, okay, I think now is the time to fundraise? Like, how did you feel it was like the right time?
With Wize, we originally bootstrapped Wize as well. Mm-hmm. And in our first year, we expanded to 3 universities. And in our, everything was really good. We were going into our second year, and we were going to expand to 6 universities. But we said, whoa, if we had X number of dollars, we could expand to 12 universities. We have all the pieces of our puzzle, checked off. We can expand to these 12 universities. But the only thing we're missing is the funds to be able to afford, going from, instead of 6, going to 12. So he said, well, if the only thing that we're missing is a little bit of money to be able to execute on going to twice as many universities, it seems like a pretty good idea to just raise that little bit of money if you really believe that you can get a much higher return on investment, as a simple example. So that's when we, did our first friends and family round. And now, that we've expanded to 12 universities and, our KPIs were really good and we're really excited about the progress, and let's say we could go to 24 universities next year. But, if we raise funds, we could go to 50 universities next year. And we could expand into the US and, we can expand into other departments like MCAT, GMAT, LSAT, CFA, CPA. And, we have a lot of, of the boxes checked off. But we just need that little bit of money. And that's the only thing we're missing. We have everything else figured out. So I really, the notion of putting gas on the fire is when you have everything figured out and you're good to go to generate a large return on investment, and a little bit of money is going to end up producing a lot more money. And, that's the time that I feel good about fundraising. It's, not to try to figure out how to overcome a particular problem or something like that. It's about everything already going really good, and it can go even better just with a little bit of money. That's kind of the way I look at it.
Oh, no, yeah, I love that. And it's amazing how you already had the 3 universities, and it's kind of like you have the proof of concept now. 3 universities accepted. And so now you have this equation. It's like a plug and play. Like, X dollars will equal X universities. Oh, let's just increase the dollars.
Yeah, exactly.
Great.
Thank you, probably Paul Graham, raise money for something that's working, not something that you need money to make work.
Yeah, totally. And as we kind of hit upon this final leg of our interview, a couple questions I wanted to ask is, one particular is, if the 20-year-old Cyrus were to look at you right now, where you're at, in this beautiful office in Vancouver, so I'm guessing that Cyrus is probably honestly like 3rd year, Miguel, gonna graduate in a year. If that Cyrus were to look at where you're right now, what do you think the emotional reaction would be?
Contentment. He'd probably, he'd be pretty understanding of where I kind of am today, I think. Hopefully, if he had enough insight into knowing everything that's happened throughout that time frame, it would be maybe different than if he didn't know, he just knew where you were. But I guess that might be a different question depending which way you go.
Mm-hmm. And if you could go back in time and give that Cyrus any kind of advice, or even a friend of Cyrus at that age any kind of advice, what kind of advice would you give?
I would emphasize that taking that a full month before deciding what I was going to pursue for the next 10 years. And, I can't remember exactly who told me it, but they're like, you're going to get into a career graduating university and, you should really be thinking, what could you do for 10 years? And thinking, Gary Vee, for example, always is talking about thinking of in 50 years sprints now, So I think the notion of choosing something when you graduate university that you could, dedicate 10 full years to and have no regrets, and thinking in a much longer time horizon than most people are used to thinking is, very important.
Mm-hmm. And I'm looking forward to what happens for the next 10 years then. I guess you've done this for 7 years, so you got 3 more years until the 10-year mark is up, and I'm looking forward to see what you think about for the next 10 years.
Yeah, what I think about for the next 10 years.
Yeah, do you have an answer for that? Have you thought about that?
No, I hope to stay in the education sector, for the next 10 years and continue pursuing, trying to make as big of an impact as I possibly can on helping, learners learn better. And I just think there's so many moves to be made. I hope more people, rush into education to fix the many, many different problems that, are everyone basically can relate to, from a little kid to a grandmother. And I hope I'm here to stay.
Yeah. And thank you, as part of someone who has gone through the education sector, and someone who might have maybe children go through the education sector too. Hopefully they'll benefit from the kind of work that you and others in the EdTech world do. And so as we kind of end this interview, is there anything that you wish that we had maybe covered, or you want to kind of leave my listeners with?
No, I think you did a remarkable job, and I'm lucky to have such a nice gentleman walk me through my first podcast. And I'm excited to listen to more and more of your podcasts as they continue to come out. So keep up the great work, and thank you very much for your time today.
Oh, no, likewise. Thank you so much for your time and your kind words, Cyrus.
Appreciate it. Have a good day, Daniel.
Thanks. You too. All right. Thank you for listening to the podcast. I hope the story was inspiring to you. Hopefully it also helped you expand your perspectives. Hopefully it also made you question the default path that you might have been going on, or the default beliefs you might have had. And maybe now it'll make you even think about doing something about it, doing something different, maybe challenging yourself, being courageous. Who knows? But regardless, I'm really happy that you took some time out of your day to listen to this fantastic story with my guest. And if you would like to somehow, in some way, contribute and help support the podcast, and maybe even just be part of the community that I'm trying to build with the greater OMD Ventures platform, really think about being a stakeholder in the platform. And the quick way to do that is to go to my website, oldmandan.com, and go to the stakeholders page. I believe it's oldmandan.com/stakeholder. And the link is also down below. And that's how you can figure out how you can subscribe, follow to get more updates on the free content, but at the same time also donate, and donate by actually just buying me a coffee. That's just how I put it. And you can buy me a coffee a month, coffee a week, or coffee every day of the year. And think about it as the way that, if you wanted to chat with me, you might just bring me out for coffee and buy me a coffee. Or if you wanted to bring one of my guests out to chat, you might buy them a coffee. So just think of it as I'm the service that's doing that for you, so you can just pay me in coffees. Don't worry, everything will still be free. It would just really help if you would like to show your support this way, so that I can use the coffee money to buy myself actual coffees, and also to buy my guests actual coffees, and use the leftover money to actually grow the platform, as well as even keep it operationally alive as well, because all this isn't really free, and it does take a lot of time to build it as well as operate it, and hopefully grow it further. So your support would be amazing if you would like to contribute. And so just check out the website, go to the stakeholders page, and read the different kind of benefits you might even get as a stakeholder. All right, thank you.